We're in Joshua chapter 2. Joshua chapter 2. There are actually several different places in Scripture where women who otherwise might be considered to be of poor reputation do something spectacular and are remembered more for the spectacular than they are for their former reputations. I'll remind you of a couple of them. There was that woman who came to the party where Jesus was the honored guest, and she brought an alabaster container of good smelling perfume, broke it, anointed him with it, and cried, and anointed his feet with her tears, and wiped her feet with her hair. The fellow that owned the house said if he knew what kind of woman she was, he wouldn't let her touch him. But Jesus says the one who is forgiven much loves much. The woman at the well had had 5 different husbands, was living with a man that wasn't her husband. Jesus said, well, if you'll let me, I'll give you living water. So it's not who you are when you start out. It's who you are when you finish up. And so we're going to talk a little bit about a woman who really started out, could have had a poor reputation in Scripture, but ended up with a really strong reputation. So Joshua chapter 2, and we're just going to read the first 2 verses and then talk about her a little bit and then move on. Joshua, the son of Nun, by the way, that's a good trivia question. Which hero of the Old Testament had no parents? Joshua, he was the son of Nun. Anyway, Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab, bring out the men who came to you and entered your house. They have come to spy out the whole land. Now, there are some scholars who say that the wording there can be interpreted differently, so as to say perhaps that she was a hostel owner, a hotel hostess. Most of the scholars that you'll read say, yeah, she owned a brothel, and that's where these men ended up. Why would they have decided that that would be the right place to go as they are spying out the land and as they're entering into Jericho? Came up with 3 or 4 possible reasons. Number 1 is its location. We find out later that her house was located in the wall of the city. So it had an entrance inside the city, and it also had an entrance at the backside. There was a window that faced out of the wall. So by entering into that particular business, that particular place, they could get out without being seen, and that's going to be important to them later on if they needed to have an escape. It was a place where a lot of out-of-towners would have come. So first of all, they would have been seen. It was normal that 2 guys from somewhere else came in and that they ended up there at the boarding house or the brothel, whichever it was. May have been both. So it would have been normal for them to go there. There would have been people there that had information not just about Jericho, but about the whole area. So if people had traveled to Jericho from other places, they could talk to those people and they could find out even more. And then I threw in a maybe. Maybe they stayed in this house because God chose Rahab in advance and they needed to stay in this house so Rahab could be saved. Rahab is in the right place at the right time and does the right thing to save her entire family. But the king of Jericho is tipped off. He knows that there are Israelite spies in town. You couldn't hide the Israelites. They're still on the other side of the Jordan, but there were over 1 million of them. So there's no place for them to hide. They've already won several battles. Some of their people have already displaced the former nations that were living there. And I mean, it's something that everybody that lived there knew about. And we'll find out later what their response was to all of these people that were gathering up on the other side of the Jordan River. But I want to look at at three different passages in the New Testament that have to do with Rahab. All right? Let's go to Matthew 1. Matthew 1. And the former tax collector, turned apostle, turned gospel writer, lists her in the list of the genealogy of Jesus. So you'll skip down to about verse 4. Ram was the father of Amminadab. Amminadab was the father of Nahshon. Nahshon was the father of Salmon. Salmon was the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. So you notice that there's just a lot of guys who begat other guys who begat other guys, but when you get to that generation, we have to stop for a minute and say the father of Obed, whose mother was, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Now, if you count up the years, it may not work to be that she was the actual great-great-grandmother of David, but she's in that lineage, right? Matthew sets his genealogy so that there's three sets of 14, right? 14 from Abraham to, I forget. Hang on a minute. I'll go down to the end of the genealogy and cheat. 14 generations from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the carrying away into Babylon, and 14 from the exile up to the Messiah. Right? There are some generations that get set aside to get the three sets of 14. But David was very interested in making this symmetrical and lining everything up. However, the point is, Rahab goes from being, she was that woman that lived in the wall and had a brothel, to she's one of the ancestors of the Messiah. Go over to Hebrews chapter 11. I like this one even better. Who's the hero of the book of Joshua? It's not a trick question. Joshua is. Joshua is the hero. He's the new leader. And we'll see, probably not this week, but at least next week, we'll look at some of the things that God did to make sure that everybody realized that Joshua was the new guy in charge and that he had fully taken over for Moses at that point. But look at 11 verse 30. Hebrews 11 verse 30. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after the army had marched around them for 6 days. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. Who doesn't get mentioned? Joshua, right? By faith, the walls fell, and we all know that Joshua was leading the assault, but his name doesn't show up in the 11th chapter of Hebrews with all the greats, right? Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph and Moses and all the greats. Joshua's name doesn't show up. Whose does? Rahab. So she goes from the owner of the brothel in the wall to somebody in the roll call of the faithful in the book of Hebrews. Got one more. Look at James chapter 2. James chapter 2. We're going to start in verse 22. So when we talk about faith without works is dead, is Rahab the first name that comes to your mind? No, but she's sure in there. Here we go. Starting in James 2:22. You see that his faith, talking about Abraham offering Isaac on the altar, you see that his faith and his actions were working together. His faith was made complete by what he did. The scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. He was also called God's friend. You see that a person is considered righteous by what they do and not by faith alone. In the same way, was not even Rahab the prostitute considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction? As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. Right? So we've memorized that faith without works is dead. Verse right before it is not about Abraham. The verse right before it is about Rahab. So here's a woman who could have been anything in history. She could have been remembered just as a brothel owner, but instead she is a forerunner of Messiah. She's in the Hebrews 11 roll call of the faithful, and she's an example from James on what it means to really live out your faith. So an amazing individual that could have been otherwise. All right, well, let's go back to Joshua and start reading again in verse 4. Joshua 2, verse 4. The woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said, "Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them." She had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax that she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. I'm going to stretch this just a little bit, but you tell me if I've lost my mind on this one. God told Abraham, "The ones that bless you I will bless, and the ones that curse you I will curse," right? That's the promise to Abraham. So here's Abraham's descendants parked on the other side of the Jordan River. They go across the river to a woman who has maybe a difficult reputation. She hides them, commits treason. She lies about it, sends the men out the wrong direction. Is she a good person or a bad person? She's a great person, right? She's a wonderful person. Why? Because she blesses the descendants of Abraham. Right? Her whole existence is based in God sees a blessing from her for his people, and he gives her a blessing in return for hers. Right? Let's keep going. Verse 8, before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, "I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below." Now skip over to verse 24. Very end. They said to Joshua, this is when the spies get back home. They said to Joshua, "The Lord has surely given us the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us." Who are they quote? Rahab. Rahab. They get back and they say, "Guys, listen, we can take this place. The lady that owns the brothel said so." Right? She's completely new. I mean, there's a whole different identity for Rahab by the time they get back to the camp. She is the one who saved them. She is the one who has given them the ultimate report. Everybody's terrified because of you. There is a series of cartoons called Veggie Tales. Anybody familiar with the Veggie Tales? Just you? Oh, I got to educate some folks. Veggie Tales. There is a Veggie Tale episode called Josh and the Big Wall. And as they approach the city of Jericho, the people up on the wall are taunting them. Here's another reference. Maybe you know, maybe you don't. The Search for the Holy Grail, Monty Python movie. People up in the French fort taunting them. It's fashioned after that. The bad guys, the people of Jericho, are little French peas, and they are taunting Joshua and all of his army, and they're saying, "There's no way that you'll ever take our city. We're too big and too bad for you. You might as well go away." Not close to Scripture, right? What does Scripture say? They were terrified because there is absolutely no battle of Jericho, right? We sing the old spiritual, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, but he did not. There was no battle. There was people walking around in circles, and then there was a wall falling down. There was no people lining up against each other and coming together in this big heated battle. God tore Jericho apart and then sent his people in to finish them off. So they were terrified for a good reason. They had heard what God could do. If God can part the Red Sea, he can tear down that wall. By the way, their wall was quite thick, and I've lost the number now, but Kathleen Kenyon did a lot of excavation there, and I want to say that it was about 14 feet thick at its thinner parts, right? So that's how you can have an actual residence inside the wall. Rahab's house was built into the wall. So it was a huge, huge complex. They were fairly confident that a normal enemy could not come in there and get them, but Israel was not a normal enemy. So verse 12. So please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and my mother, my brothers and my sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death. Our lives for your lives, the men assured her. If you don't tell what we're doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land. So she let them down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. She said to them, "Go to the hills, so the pursuers will not find you. Hide yourselves there 3 days until they return, and then go on your way." Now the men had said to her, "This oath you made us swear will not be binding on us, unless when we enter the land you have tied this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down. And unless you have brought your father and your mother and your brothers and all your family into your house. If any of them go outside your house into the street, their blood will be on their own heads. We will not be responsible. As for those who are in the house with you, their blood will be on your head if a hand is laid, their blood will be on our head if a hand is laid on them. But if you tell what we are doing, then we're released from the oath that you have made us swear." And she said, "I agree. Let it be as you say." So she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. How long do you think it took from the time they hit the ground, getting down out of the window, to her tying a scarlet thread in that window? I'm thinking about how long does it take to go find a scarlet thread, right? As soon as I've got it hanging out that window, because I don't know how quick they're coming back, and I want to make sure that me and my family are covered. Now tell me, will that preach? How soon do I want to make sure that I and my family are safe? Do I want to wait till the last minute and hope, or do I want to do something about it right now? So she went and got that scarlet thread and tied it in the window right there. When they left, they went into the hills, and they stayed there 3 days, Rahab's suggestion, until the pursuers had searched all along the road and returned without finding them. Then the two men started back. They went down out of the hills, forded the river, and came to Joshua the son of Nun, and told him everything that had happened to them. And then they said to Joshua, "The Lord has surely given us the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us." I want you to just skip over for just a minute to chapter 6. We'll just get a little preamble. We're going to have some other things happen in between their spying out the land and actually going and taking the land. Joshua chapter 6, beginning in verse 1. The gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out, no one came in. What do we call that now? A siege. Right? Israel laid siege to Jericho. They were camped outside, and there's nobody coming in or out. They're all just stuck inside. I don't know whether they had a spring of water in there. I don't know how much food they had. But it's not a typical siege in that they're going to wait until the people inside are dead and dying from malnutrition. The people inside are too afraid to come out, and it wasn't time for the Israelites to go in. But now look at verse 2. The Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and all of its fighting men." Right? So the report that the men give is almost prophetic. Right? They said to Joshua, "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands." And then when the Lord comes and visits Joshua, we call it chapter 6, "Joshua, I just want you to know that I have already given you Jericho." It's not a question. Like I said, there's not a battle. It's not something that has to be decided on the field. It's already taken place in the mind of God. It's already done. I gave it to you. It's yours. Go get it. You don't have to do anything else. And I'll give you the battle plan, and then he lays that out in chapter 6. This is huge stuff. Right? This is 440 years or so after God tells Abraham, all of this belongs to you. Look to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west. Everything belongs to you. It takes 440 years before he actually turns it over to the children of Abraham, to the Israelites who finally are faithful enough, long enough, to get to the place that they can inherit the thing. But this is not just about Joshua, and it's not just about the people in the desert. This is God's finale with Abraham concerning the land. If he keeps this promise, if the people can go across the Jordan and take Canaan, and it really belongs to them, then everything else that God promised Abraham can be true too. If God never delivers on the land, if they can never go across Jordan and they never own the land of Canaan, then when God said, through your seed all the nations of the earth will be blessed, then that comes into question. If you can't do that, can you do this? Well, he's about to do that. And then another, 1,000 years or so, 1,500 years, he would do the other and finally bring Messiah through the lineage of Abraham. Any thoughts on that you want to add? Yes, sir.
You know, I just wondered about the lineage of Christ. I always, and I've known it, I always thought it was complete Jewish lineage all the way back. But Rahab, that's not the case.
Right. In fact,
Is there anyone else in his lineage that's not?
yeah, Ruth. Ruth was from Moab, and her mama Naomi, her mother-in-law Naomi, brought her back, and then she meets Boaz and gets married. So she's actually the grandmother. So there's 2 generations in a row that are listed there that are from somewhere else. So we have 2 Gentiles. Now, these are going to be grafted in Gentiles. These are not Gentiles like us who stay Gentiles forever. These are Gentiles who marry in and take on the law of Moses and become, grafted in Jews with the rest of them. But yeah, there's a couple of generations of women in there that were not Jewish. And depending on how you count genealogies, some of the genealogies were counted through the father in the family, and some were counted through the mother in the family. So if you take it back that way, it's even more compelling that God used women that didn't belong to the nation of Israel to begin with, grafted them in to bring Messiah. So it's really, yes, ma'am?
When the building falls down, does the walls go out?
Yes, ma'am, they think so. When Kathleen did her excavation, the walls crumbled and outwardly.
It says in the Bible that the walls fell flat.
Well, there was a pile, I think.
Well, I know they didn't go out, they
Yeah.
fell flat, and that was in here. Well, I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
So, nothing.
They pancaked.
Yes.
And we needed to, here's another little book, we'll call it Pancaked and Panicked. The story of the Jericho fall. Pancaked and Panicked. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Wasn't the rope they were supposed to leave to save where they her house? That was the rope that she let them down with. That's what it says.
Yeah. She let them down by a rope, but was the rope scarlet?
Yes.
Oh, it does? Oh, well, I missed that completely. So she didn't have to go anywhere and find one? She already had it in her hand?
The Lord had it fixed for her.
All right. Well, I'm slow, but I catch up eventually. All right. So the scarlet thread was there real quick on their way out of town. You got to mark the window, right? So you know which one. And when you tell everybody else in the army, just in case those 2 guys aren't the ones that are going right there, better let everybody know what they're looking for and where it is, so that and evidently she didn't tell, because there would have been about 100 scarlet threads hanging in all the windows in the wall. She did tell everything she knew. Anything else? All right, well, if there's any way we could help you by way of a public response, we'd love to help you as we stand and sing.